Hi everyone, welcome to the latest edition of Pro Wrestling Defined. I'm your host Jonathan O'Dwyer, and please remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep up with all future content for interviews with current stars and legends of the business. And today we're welcoming back the son of a legend, son of one of the greatest of all time, the one and only beast from the East Bam Bam Bigelow, his son Shane Bigelow. How are you doing today, my friend? Welcome back.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me back. I like the scenery. I see you got some new pictures in the back. It's looking good.
Yeah,
Like
I got your dad up here, so
yeah, man. The atom bomb. I distinctly had that on my wall when I was a kid, and like I remember just that character. Like that's so cool. All that stuff. It just brings back memories. So
yeah, oh my gosh, what a time, what a time, and like just the characters, the outfits, everything. It was just it was a magic time back then, like for sure. But and it's funny because I had the Atom Bomb poster up on my wall as well. Like we're actually good friends now. You know, I had him on the show before as well. We're really good friends. Like so, yeah, it's cool full circle stuff.
yeah, man, it is really cool. I had all those posters, the Undertaker poster. I found it in my garage, my mom's garage a couple months ago, and it's like, to Shane, stay. Like it's something real like Crypt Keeper esque, that they would sign, and it was like sign the Undertaker, and it was the big giant purple like of him, and it was so cool. And like I gotta go get that framed again.
Oh, that's awesome, man. So, how's life been since we last talked? How's everything been, man?
It's all good. I'm on summer vacation. I'm a little tanner, a little thinner. I'm relaxing a little bit more. I will, with the restrictions and stuff. My girlfriend and I, we were fortunate enough to get away on vacation after the school let out, and for whatever restrictions there was, it was nice to get away. But now I'm back to fun in the sun, and football season starts up soon, so I'm gearing up for that right now.
Awesome, man. Well, one of the things in our last chat, like I was kicking myself afterwards. I think I texted you afterwards as well. It's like, how did I not think to bring her up? Luna, talk about your memories of your dad's friendship with Luna and like the memories that stick out of the two of them together because they were such an awesome pairing on screen. Like it translated so well. What are your memories of Luna from back then?
But Luna Vachon, for one, is not my mother. That was that was like the initial memory is like people be like, your dad's Bam Bam Bigelow, your mom's Luna Vachon. And I'd be like, no, I'm way too good looking. No, Luna was awesome. She was like a family member because back then they traveled from show to show together. So it'd be my father, Luna, Doink and Dink in like a Lincoln Continental town car, and they'd go from one TV taping, they drive probably 600-700 miles, go to another one. Like they were the four of those were in a car together. Like it was my father and Ray Apollo, Doink the Clown in the front seat, and then it was Dink and Luna in the back. And they would tell stories that they would turn the air conditioning so low. My father and Doink loved it so low, so cold that Luna would just be in the back, and Dink would just be complaining like, "Come on, look, turn it up, it's too freezing." But they were great. Like Luna Vachon was such an integral part of my father's career that she even translated. She would when they would do road shows locally, she would come. She would stay at our house. Um, Early on in her career, if you actually look, when she was shaving the side of her head, she used to use stencils and she would draw on the veins. I like distinctly remember her getting the veins actually tattooed in my like kitchen in the town I grew up in. Like, so Luna was great. She was. What's funny is she's got that raspy voice, but that was how she talked off camera too. So like she's scared. She was kind of scary to a 5-6 year old guy like myself. Like, and then everybody. I just remember people being like, "That's your mother. That's your mother." I'm like, "No, don't insult my mother like that. Don't you speak evil on my father like that. Don't you wish that on me." She was great. No,
Awesome, man. And like you mentioned Ray Apollo there, like they had that awesome feud, himself and Doink. And WrestleMania 10, another big moment in his career. I actually watched that yesterday. It's actually one thing your dad had a knack for was really making the best out of whatever was given to him. And like that match is actually quality if you go back and watch it. But talk about your memories of the friendship between him and Ray.
That's my uncle Ray Ray. That's my brother's godfather. Like when even after my father passing, like we would go up to his house, we'd spend the night, we'd drink hot toddies till we'd pass out. Like, and he would just tell us all these stories of just road stories of things that you sit there and you're like, why aren't you writing this stuff down? Why haven't you made a book? And he would just be like, these are stories for me and your father, and they're for me to tell you, and for you to do whatever you want to do with them. It's up to you. But you know, so much of those guys' lives, like my father couldn't take the character off. Ray Doink, he fortunately enough he put a mask on, he had makeup, so he was able to kind of travel a little incognito. So much of these guys' private lives are out in the public, and they got to separate that so Ray Apollo, Doink the Clown, we would just spend time with him, and just he would tell us road stories, and he would tell us all these crazy events of people holding guns to my father's head, and him in a Lincoln town car, like ready to like drive over this guy at a gas station because they're getting robbed in like Podunk, Arkansas at 2:30 in the morning. Like just crazy things that like a friendship and a bond that goes beyond just a feud for 6 to 8 months in the 90s. Like these guys were brothers, road brothers. They spent every day together. Like you talk about the clique being those 3-4 guys. Well, Bam Bam, Doink, the Wild Samoans, all those guys, like they were I'm sure they had another name, you know, like that's how those guys traveled. They had groups, and they stuck with one another like brothers all the way through.
Definitely. And that one thing from that era as well. Like obviously we talked last time about the match with LT and everything, but one thing I was curious about was like when they initially like did the setup for that, the shove at the Royal Rumble where LT was in the crowd and your dad shoves him and everything. Did you actually like did he tell you that that was coming? Like how much did you actually know, if you can remember back? Like what was that kind of like a what the hell, moment for you, or had your dad kind of schooled on that already?
Well, what year was that? That was what, 93?
5.
95.
Yeah.
So I was born in 88. I was like 7, 8 years old. Like I didn't know which way was up. So, you know, like everything, whenever we watched the show, it was a surprise to us. I'm sure he probably, you know, I probably heard it in passing of him telling my mother or something being built up. But like it was never like I never understood that like, oh, my father and the greatest linebacker of all time are gonna have a pseudo feud that's gonna build on. Like it just I didn't realize all this stuff until I got older because I was still 7 years old. You know, my brother was 3 years old. So we just remember just like being in the moment and the experience of like when I remember my father like having to go buy a suit because he had to go, well, he had suits, but buying like a suit to do like the promos where they like had to do the press conference where Vince had to like he had to what did he do? He banned him without pay or something. He suspended him effective immediately. It was just like he gave him like a week to go fishing. He's like, go train LT for a couple days. You know, give you some time off. That's how we'll take you off the active roster so you can devote your time to him and get him up to speed. And it's just looking back at it now, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Like I see why that, you know. But no, I had no clue. I was clueless.
All right. And yeah, like you mentioned Vince there, what was the dynamic like? Did you ever get to see what the dynamic was like actually between Vince and your dad?
No. Like I got to meet Vince because when they would go to shows, they'd be there 7, 8 hours, almost 10 hours ahead of time. And, you know, they would go through the setup, they would go through meetings, they would have their things. And of course, you know, my father walking me through the aisles. He's like, "Oh, me and my son Shane, blah blah blah." So that's how I know him. But like, he's a businessman. He's
Mm.
professional. He's going to keep it behind closed doors. And all those guys kept it professional. And especially when you're meeting someone's kid, like
Yes.
you're gonna put on the good face. You can be like, "What's up, big man? How you doing?" You know, and like those guys are great for that. They're always showmen, whether there was disagreements or not. So those guys were always fantastic to me. They were always nice. Vince was every time I met him, shook my head, "How you doing, big man?" And Vince's voice, it's just like I got to experience that, and it, yeah. But I never got to see when I got a little older. My father interacted more with Ted Turner in WCW,
Mm.
and I got to see almost like listen to this was the age of cell phones, so everything's on speakerphone, sitting in the car and driving and talking. So I got to hear my father talk to Ted Turner a little bit more business wise, and then he'd get off the phone. He'd be like, "That guy owns half the United States." I'm like, I'm like, really? He's like, "Yeah, pretty much, yeah."
Big time. And just jumping forward, actually, like on the friendship end of things, the triple threat obviously was like one of the highlights of his career, and obviously he was really. I think we touched on it last time as well, but talk about kind of the camaraderie between him, Shane, and Candido, because I know you traveled with Candido a lot as well when your dad was doing those shows back then. Talk about what the dynamic was like with those guys.
It was the Jersey Triad. I mean, they're Jersey guys. Candido's from Spring Lake, the town next door where I live right now. He grew up. His brother Johnny Candido actually sent me clippings of when Chris first came back from either Memphis or wherever he was doing in the Southwest. He would set up a ring in the local parks around here and just wrestle around. He'd have all the kids, and it would be like romper room. My father would show up and like come roll around and do just like these nonchalant, like impromptu exhibition matches in like a park that like nobody knows about, but all like the kids in the neighborhood would like ride their bikes around and be like, "Let's go beat this shit out of Bam Bam Bigelow and Chris Candido." And he sent me like newspaper clippings, like some old, how you see like they're all like faded, old and yellow. So like, and that's years before. This is 80s, early 90s. That's years before the ECW. So they had a bond from back home. Shane Douglas, Jersey guy, they just stuck together. It was much like Ray Apollo and my father in the WWF. It, they they picked up in in the ECW. Those guys were, you went backstage and they were in the back of a hockey rink with folding chairs. Their three folding chairs were catty corner to one another's. Like those guys were. That's why they worked so well together, because they could just keep bouncing off of one another, because they were always ball busting one another. That's how they stayed sharp. Like you could not catch. Chris cannot be slipping. Shane cannot be slipping. My father, like they were so quick to jump on one another that when they went out there and the cameras turned on, Shane loved to talk anyway. So they just let him go, and Candido had just such a personality that he didn't have to do anything. He would just make faces. And my father, just be in the back, loved it, because he's like, "I don't have to do all the WWF-esque things. I just got to stand in the back, flip the finger, and put up the triad. Like, dude, I'm good with that." He loved it. So it was a great time between those three guys. They had a lot of fun, a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember seeing in an interview with your dad as well, like him saying that he absolutely loved it, and he loved working with Shane as well, because Shane was kind of big and thick as well, so he could really lay everything in on him as well. Like it was kind of like a throwback to like the Japan days, like where he could get really stiff in the ring. Like so, I'd say there was a couple of sore nights for Shane.
Oh, I actually, almost every video I see on YouTube, or because I follow it on Instagram, there's like a good 3 years where Shane Douglas is in like an elbow sling, just because his arm just keeps getting ripped off, and like every pay-per-view he's just like, "I'm taking it off," and then he's like, "The elbow's good again." But like dude, you keep getting surgery because you just don't want to stand in the background. Like, I'm sure that's just from having 400-pound dudes coming off the top rope, beating them up. You know, like ECW took a toll on every single guy that was there, hands down.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Good. And like speaking of VCW as well, like your dad was featured in the RVD documentary there on the WWE Network recently, and like your RVD always gives your dad huge props, like for kind of helping him get to the next level. Did you watch it, and what were your thoughts on it?
I get every time something comes out, like I get my phone explodes. My girlfriend's like, I don't. She's like, who you talk to all day? I'm like, no, people just tag me in things, left and right, tag me. So like they tag me in the little clips. Like I'm gonna be honest, I don't actively seek and watch like the long documentaries because for me, I don't see it the same way. Like I see like a guy at the peak of his career, and then like you see the like injuries that fade him out, and it's like sad, it's heartbreaking. So like
Yeah.
I like the quick like 2-minute clip where they're like RVDs, throwing props to my father and they give it back. So like I watch those and it makes me feel good and people, people tell me, but we touched upon it, it's a very toxic culture that like I try not to put myself out there too much. I try not to to put myself in a position to get let down because for as many people that want to post and say great things, there's always that one guy that just wants to pop your bubble and that
Hmm.
wants to shoot you down, and it's like you don't even know you're dragging somebody through the dirt. So the RVD thing, that was awesome. I love that, but I didn't watch it in its entirety because for as many ups as there is, there's an equal side on the latter half.
Yeah, but I think in terms of legacy, I mean, your dad's. I'm getting caught up in my freaking headset's cables. Your dad's legacy, like it speaks for itself, really. I mean, history speaks for itself, and like, I mean, anybody that really knows the business knows his place in it in the upper echelon of the greats of all time. I mean, when you have the likes of Bret Hart saying that he's the best big man he's ever been in the ring with, I mean, and like he's consistently said that over the years. And this is a guy like that's been in there with Taker, you know, everybody of that magnitude. Like, so I mean that really speaks volumes to your dad's place. So look, everybody has their haters, you know. I'm sure I have mine, you know.
Yeah,
So fuck them.
fuck them is right. Fuck them and feed them fish. It's just they. But there's an interview when my father is maybe 23, 24 years old, and he's getting his head tattooed. It's like one of the first introductions of Bam Bam Bigelow. And they're in an old timey tattoo shop, and he's getting his head done. No, like the most unhygienic thing you've ever seen. And he's sitting there with this high squeaky voice because he doesn't really have his wrestler voice yet. He's still like a young adult, young man. And he's like, you know what? People love to hate. And if I can find and like he's like, people love to hate. And if I can find what they hate, then I've done my job. And it's this is the only business where you will reoccurringly come back to watch somebody you hate get their ass beat. Like if the New York Yankees were horrible and I hated them, I'm not gonna watch them. But I'm gonna turn it on to watch Bam Bam Bigelow get his ass beat by Bret Hart, like because that's what drives people. What's funny, Bubba Ray Dudley and says strike a chord. Strike a chord with the audience. Like if I could strike a chord with them, I got you. And there's promos of Bubba and Devon in the old DCW days, literally like, "What did your mother teach you how to suck?" Like, dude,
Yeah.
like things that just get a rile and get people love that visceral. Just I want to kill you, but he had everybody in that stadium in the palm of his hands because he told them what the hell they didn't want to hear. It's crazy. Hatred is so prevalent in wrestling.
Yeah, it is one of those businesses that's like it is built on heat. You know, for like there was always that argument between like Hogan and Piper of like who really drew WrestleMania 1. Was it, did they come to see Hogan, or did they come to see Hogan beat the shit out of Roddy Piper? You know,
Yeah.
and I think like for every great, I mean, it's the same really for any TV show, really, as well, isn't it? Like, you know, you have to have that great villain to be the thorn in the side of the great hero. You have to have that thing to root against, so you have the thing to root for then as well. And he was great on both ends of it, because your dad was actually hard to dislike. Like I remember as a kid, I wasn't necessarily one of the types of fans, even when I was really small. Um, I wasn't one of the ones that would like cheer the heels. There were certain heels that I liked, and your dad was one of them. Like, you know, even in the Doink thing, I remember I was pulling for your dad. In the LT thing, I was pulling for your dad. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you here now, like, you know, but like even as a kid, like, you know, I really liked him. And so he had a real niche on both ends of it. Like he could get heat, and you know, I think people really respected then his actual in-ring ability then as well, and that's what got him over as a fan favorite as well.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of people getting heat, I watched Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful, after he passed away, with the knockoff Ultimate Warrior, the WCW match, and they had back in WCW they had that like knockoff. He was like I don't even
The Renegade.
the Renegade, and
Yeah.
he came out and was doing all the things, and like Paul Orndorff was doing like the most just heel type things. They were out like on a beach, and he was throwing sand in his face, and these people were just like so against the face, the knockoff Ultimate Warrior. They loved it. They loved it, and like as I get older, I love the heels, the great heels, like Razor Ramon. When I was a
Oh,
kid, like Razor Ramon was the coolest thing. Like he walked out with that toothpick, like Scott Hall, that whole gimmick, everything. Like everybody hated him, but he was the coolest bad guy there was. Like he had this horrible Miami accent. He shot the promos, but like Razor Ramon, he was the shit. Love
yeah,
the heels. Gotta love the heels.
definitely. And what are some of the things, like getting more onto the kind of personal end? What are some of the things like character traits or whatever that from your dad that you see in yourself now as you're getting older? Like, well, what is there? Any things that really stick out? Like, where it's like that's just what my dad would say, or that's just what my dad would do, or that type of thing.
See, that's where you gotta ask like my family members, because that's that when I get mad, I'm like, my father was right. He said this, like you dumbass. My father was right. This and that. Like what I got from him was the things that he kind of complained to me for being a lazy ass kid for. Like I understand now, the hustle that he wanted me to have to, and I said it before, not to half-ass things, because like I feel like the phrase of my childhood was like stop half-assing it, and just committing your whole attention to one thing, and not separating and dividing yourself amongst too many things, because trying to be more than one thing at once, it's tough.
Mm.
So, having watched him balance being a public figure, being a private person, being a father, being a husband, being a family member, and then circumnavigating that with a 300 day, 300 plus a year travel schedule, like nothing that comes my way do I have any grounds to actually complain about, but I will. So, like, yeah, I can't complain, but I'm going to. That's for sure. I learned just how to be a good man from him, and he was a good person. We talk about heels, like for some people, it's really hard to see him as a bad even character, because he's just such a, like, people describe him as a teddy bear out of the ring. Like how does he turn it on? But then again, he grew up in a very tough situation. He grew up in a very tough neighborhood, from a very tough town, a tough family. He went through the shit and came out on the other side and was a great man for it. So he taught me to overcome adversity the hard way sometimes.
Awesome, man. And oh, excuse me. But on the backstage end, I've heard that he was meant to be quite a good river as well. Did you get to witness any of that, maybe like in the ECW or WCW days, like any of the stuff that he would pull on any of the guys behind the scenes?
So, yeah, well, like to the point where like people now talk about it in like infamous like the old like Dink thing where like Dink said he had to go to Rousseau and have him stop making fun of Dink because my father was picking on him too hard. Like I've heard stories of him putting him in like an overhead bin in like aircraft, and then so like yeah, they ribbed each other. They were always having fun. Like I said before, there was you couldn't catch yourself slacking because they were so sharp. They had to be so sharp because this, even though it's a choreographed, it's not scripted. So you need to be able to think on the fly. You need to be able to adjust to anything that anybody throws at you, whether it's physically or verbally. So these guys were always on top of the game and always busted each other's balls. But they had fun with it. Obviously, some people take things a little too far, but they had good times. I can't really like. I remember like. No, I can't think of any offhand. I just remember like my father. I had a birthday party one year, and we had like an active roster, like a B-level active roster WWF guys water balloon fight versus me and my friends versus my father and his friends, and like my dad like hauling off a water balloon in my face at like 80 miles an hour on like a 5-year-old kid, and then like me crying because he hit me so hard in front of Lex Luger, who's like wearing like a fanny pack, and he's just like trying to like daintily hit kids with water balloons. My father is just like, no one's safe, and it's just drilling me. And like the type of crying where you can't catch your breath, you're like, and like Yokozuna and Lex Luger and all these guys are like running around with water balloons trying to hit these kids, and my dad is just like laughing his ass off because he just drilled me right in the mouth, like not even worried that his kid's crying. He's just like, that's what you get. Like, so that was the life and times of my birthdays.
I watched the interview you did recently with Chris Play, good friend of mine. Everybody check out his channel on YouTube, Dead Men Don't Talk, or Dead Men Talk. Sorry, Chris. Dead Men Talk on YouTube. Subscribe, everybody subscribe to his YouTube channel. But I watched your interview with him there recently. You told a great story about backstage. I think it was at an ECW event where some fan got kind of antsy with you and your dad had to deal with him. Can you tell that story here?
Oh yeah. So ECW events used to be held at hockey rinks, right? Or empty venues, and hockey rinks worked really well because you could just leave the glass up and you could put all those psychos in an arena and the chairs there. So I forget what show we were at, but my father was in the back. He's like, you want to go walk around, watch some of the matches, just stay on the outside. These are the two guys you can come back in and out. And it was like Sabu and somebody else. Where they always just made it into the crowd, and they were just beating the brakes off of one another. And ECW fans, like, they didn't spread out and give these people space. Like, they literally just like caved in on the wrestlers. So like there's like chair shots, and there's like a guy right there, like just getting front row seats. So I'm not going towards it, but I'm going to see it. And like this dude is just blasting. He's just like, get out of my fucking way, kid. And just like completely mollywops me in the side of the head. Like I'm another time in my life where somebody hit me in the mouth and I can't catch my breath. So I like go in the back and I'm like that, like, and he's like, what the fuck happened? And I'm like, oh, so God, hey, like somebody help me. And he just like nonchalantly he goes to these two security guys who were definitely breaking into the business, and they were like 6'10", 6'11", respectively. Like these were the biggest dudes in the arena, but they were doing security for the guys who were beating the brakes off each other. She's like, go find them. Like, oh my God. So like 10, 11 years old, go, and this dude had the most, like, ECW had like the most obnoxiously awesome t-shirts that like when you saw it, like you knew that was the shirt. You're like, that's the only guy in here with like a freaking Terry Funk shirt telling you to, like a Funk You shirt. So like it was so distinct, like that's the guy. They end up getting him in the back. His feet don't touch the ground the whole way from being ripped out of his drunken seat all the way into the backstage. And then like they always had these big black curtains, and you just saw like the curtains close, and then you just hear like, so you want to hit kids? And then you hear like just thuds, whacks. And I'm sitting there, I don't know what's going on at the time. I'm sitting there with Chris Candido, and he's like, hey, big man, you know, like he had like a kind of a shaky voice out of promos, you know, like when he was talking to me, he was like, hey, well, how's it going, little man? You doing all right? Like you just got punched in the mouth. And they were doing their thing in the back. The guy was so blacked out drunk, right? Apparently he was just belligerent. When he came to from getting the life smacked out of him, right? Because my father always taught me, he's like, listen, one thing we do, you and I go to a bar, you punch somebody in the face, they fall and hit their head on a curb and they die, we both go to jail. He goes, demoralize them, smack the shit out of them. So he just smacked this guy
Good advice.
Till he blacked out. I like literally, I to this day, I just smack people. But he smacked this guy, blacked out. When he woke up, the cops were dragging him out, and he spit in one cop's face, kicked another cop, like just completely started fighting. Like, dude, you might have actually been able to like press charges on my father in the beginning. Like, you just threw that out the window within the first instance of waking up. So that was my first time I ever got punched in the face by a grown man. It wasn't last one. Last time.
Only in ECW.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. It was so awesome.
Yeah, you missed that now. Like it was just the energy of it and everything. I actually remember getting my first ECW tape when I was about 10. It's actually probably the one that you referenced earlier on, because I remember Bubba Ray Dudley doing that promo with the crowd. Like, I mean, he's going so far. Like, I mean, he's going out to the women in the crowd, and he's just like, YouTube would probably flag me if I repeated the stuff he was saying.
I don't know if I can keep my job as a teacher if we continue to talk about like what like that, like watch those promos now. I'm like, oh my God, but everybody in that arena, like they let it be known, like we're going to Poughkeepsie, New York, to all those fat trailer park slums next weekend, and like let it be known that these people, like nowadays, that they might call that like inciting riots. Like I don't know.
Oh yeah, no way we should get away with it now.
Yeah, GCW around here is close. They're pretty crazy. Their fans are nuts, you know. So
is that the one that Zack Ryder was just on, where he did the deathmatch thing and they all threw the shit into the ring afterwards?
Yeah. So at least they're holding it down. Somebody's keeping it alive. Yeah. GCW is nuts. I like can't even watch. I'm like, like you're just taking a fluorescent light bulb to your forehead.
Oh yeah, I hate that stuff as well. Like I love the vibe of ECW, but like some of the violence was just like, oh Jesus, I don't know. But your dad actually brought a great balance, and like and RVD and some of the other guys, because they brought really good wrestling into it as well. So like it wasn't all blood and guts. Like you know it had a balance.
And what a lot of people forget is like there was greats, like there was like the backstage was Terry Funk, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Like that's another guy that him and Bundy are like my two like golden era guys that I remember like when I was a kid. That like Jimmy Superfly Snuka was the coolest thing in the ring, out of the ring, and he was the nicest guy. That I mean, whatever had happened, and then like you never would have known he would have killed somebody. But he was a great guy.
Yeah.
I love Jimmy Superfly Snuka. Like he was so nice. They were such great friends with my father, and they always treated me with most respect. But like there were some serious legends that were in and around ECW. Like I the other day, Stone Cold was in ECW. I didn't even
Yep.
realize that. So like I don't know.
Jericho, Rey Mysterio, tons of them. Like even some of them made like cameos. Scott Hall was there for a few nights as well. Like so like yeah, he was. There was all kinds of freaking legends in and out of there. Like
Rick Rude, which is
yeah.
funny. Um, my mom ended up doing like one of the in-ring promos and went up there with Rick Rude where he like kissed the women and they like passed out and did all that stuff. Like Rick Rude on the mic was fantastic.
Oh.
ECW, you could just sit there and watch it in and out, and it's just very undervalued, I feel.
Definitely. Do you actually have like a dream match of your dad that never happened? So is there somebody that he didn't get to work with where you kind of think like, oh geez, that would have been absolutely awesome, like if that happened?
Dream match. I don't really know if there's like a particular dream match or just like my dream would have been to have seen it maturate the way that some of the guys from his era did, like in RVD,
Mm.
you know, like Tommy Dreamer, like the Dudleys, Bubba Devon, like to see and be able to get his perspective. And maybe if he were, if he transitioned to the more of the front office and taking a book and running his own little promotion, like that's what my dream would have been to see is like the abilities post wrestling. Like he was articulate, he was well, spoken, he was a businessman, so he could have done anything. So would have been to see how things would have panned out if it trended on the way that it continued. Um, but if I had to say, like, if I can call back one more time to see like the two of them in the ring, I'd have to say my father and Doink again, just to see, because like to see the little things, like they were always laughing at each other. They were always like there was always something hilarious going on. So it'd have to be like a tag team match of Doink and Dink versus my father and Luna, and you got to have Oliver Humperdinck on the side because Humperdinck just adds to the whole circus of the thing. And that right there would be my dream, to see that one more time. Or him versus Vader in like a major American series. That would have never worked
out. I think just for the spectacle of it, I think it would have. Because like they had matches against each other in Japan as well as tagging as well. There's one I must watch actually. I just seen it on YouTube yesterday. I must watch it. It's their Dad and Vader as a team against the Steiners. That's one I have to watch. That's fucking that's going to be some intense shit right there. Like,
well, the Steiners. So my father and Vader in Japan as a tag team, and the Steiners in Japan were like equal. Those are like two great tag teams, the Steiner brothers, and they're coming off of Division I wrestling, like so they're still wearing the singlets, like the Fred Flintstone print type singlet, and like he's still like the dog face gremlin. Like the Steiner brothers, those were my guys back when it was before it was Big Papa Pump, when it was Scott and Rick Steiner. Like those guys, they just look nasty. And I watched that match, and I think it was great. If you listen to it, like you have all the Japanese commentators and they're like, oh, blah, blah, blah. But you hear them every once in a while and they'll be like, fuck, like they'll scream the most American, like just like out of nowhere, because they knew that nobody spoke or understood and they could just speak freely. So like they had it was I feel like Japan was a little looser for them. They got to let their hair down what hair they didn't have, but they got to let their hair down, so to speak, a little bit more.
What did your dad ever kind of share with you later on, like some of the guys that he really enjoyed working with in the ring, like some of his favorite guys from a performance standpoint? Who did he really like working with in the ring?
Definitely Brett. I mean, they fed off of each other so well. He loved working with Brett. He loved working with the Wild Samoans, Alpha Sika, Bundy. You know, King Kong Bundy was a great friend of his. He really enjoyed working with the guys that he traveled with. You know, he loved working with Taker. Loved working with going off of the Samoans. He loved working with Yokozuna because that's family members, the Hanoi family. All those I say old guys, like working with Snuka, working with Terry Funk, working with, those guys were the ones that I remember him most fondly talking about, and not so much working with Hogan because that's a lot of stress. I felt like that's, you got to be sharp. You got to be on top of your game. And he was young when that went around. So
Yeah,
I think later in his career, he wanted to work with his friends, and he enjoyed heavily working with Candido. Jerry the Wall Tootie, who was like a B-level guy in the WCW, ECW, but 6'11" giant living in the spare bedroom of our house. Like,
oh wow.
he enjoyed that. That's Jerry the Wall Tootie is the godfather of my sister.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I actually saw him wrestle over here in 2002 at a WWA show. Yeah, he was over here. He was called Malice at the time. God,
Yep.
he's such an underrated talent. He was the Wall in WCW as well. But yeah, he was one, like he had the size, and like he could he could do anything physically as well. Like it's a pity he didn't reach bigger heights as well.
No, and a lot of yeah, like my father brought him along on a lot of things. Like wanted to make sure because he saw the potential in a guy like that. I mean, we were talking about Adam Bomb before. Like that's another. They're the same type, super athletic and just huge. Like the sky was the limit for him. It was unfortunate that he passed away too soon as well.
Definitely. And what are can you think of like one of the more fond or personal memories of your dad that you could share that really sticks out? Maybe more kind of on of his kind of maybe of his funny side, of his quirky side, like it's something that sticks out.
Like fishing memories. Like we were always like out doing things, and it was like, well, what precarious situation? Like, how can Dad sink the boat today? Or like, how can we get our truck stuck in the mud before cell phones, like out deep in the woods? I remember he flew us out to Texas to go bass fishing one time, and on these lakes, and it was like monsoon season weather, and where the lakes are, there have these like berms, and they're like 20-30 feet up, and you end up standing up on the top of them, and like he's fishing, and it is like, have you ever seen Caddyshack where it's the raining scene where he's like, I don't think the hard stuff's coming down for a little while? Like that's my father out there. It is just the most saturated rain you can think of, and he's still fishing 20-30 minutes, and like me and the guide are sitting in this Jeep just trying not to get rained on. Like half hour later, he catches this fish, right? He's so excited, he hooks it, and his feet slip out from underneath him, and he goes barreling down this like mud slip and slide all the way into like this lake ravine, which is in South Texas. And there's probably like black mambas, alligators, crocodiles, and like you can't get up the side. And he's just like clawing up it. And he ends up having to go to swim across the thing. But like just funny things like that. There's another story that I don't think anybody knows. So you know the Andre the Giant story where he talks about him shitting on Bad News
Oh
Brown?
yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember the interview.
So
It's funny.
so it's a good thing that my father's not here. I'm gonna tell you a story about him shitting himself at Six Flags because so the WWF one time had this like open the I live by Six Flags Great Adventure. It's only like maybe 25 miles north or south, whatever, from here. They had this like fanfare day where they had all these water slides. They just came out and they brought all the WWF superstars out to go down these water slides. Now, what they don't, the reason why there's a weight limit on a water slide that's like 60, 70 feet high is because the force and momentum of a 400-pound dude coming down there is like a cannonball. So they're like all like looking at the WWF rosters. So like my father's 6'4", 400 pounds, you know, even somebody who's seemingly like skinny, like Undertaker still weighs 320 pounds. So my father says he goes up to the top of this water slide and he's you know, all gas, no brakes. He's like, I don't care. I'm going as fast down this slide as I possibly can. So the guy goes to him. He's like, Mr. Bigelow, you're going to have to cross your legs on the way down. He's like, what's that for? He's like, well, you cross your legs. It slows you down on your way down. So he's like, fuck that. I'm not doing that. He's like, I want to see this thing go. Well, the reason why you cross your legs is because if you don't cross your legs and close your legs, water gets to shoot up certain orifices. So he said he goes down this slide and he's like, I'm gaining momentum. And all of a sudden he goes, hoo! Hoo! About midway through the slide, he gets to the bottom of it.
Oh man.
Bottom, you know how there's like the trough of water, and he gets to the bottom and he just sees like little speckles all throughout the water, and he's like, I didn't say anything to anybody. I just fixed my shorts, proceeded to get up. He goes, I am the first person to shit on a water slide at Hurricane Harbor in Six Flags, New Jersey, in Jackson. I'm like, geez, man. But that's just, you know, that was funny. Like it's not like he's gonna be embarrassed. Like him and his friends are dying about that. So like they've cleaned it since then. It's been about 30. Yeah, probably about like 28, 30 years. But yeah, he went to Hurricane Harbor and gave himself a liquid enema on the slide.
That's brilliant, man. Oh, that's classic.
Yeah. I don't know if I could top that one.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's a good one to have on the resume.
Yeah.
If you could pick, like he had so many great moments, but if you could pick like favorite moment from his wrestling career for you, from like an observer's point of view, like which moment from his career means the most, and is there kind of a moment backstage that you shared with him that really sticks out, that meant a lot to you as well?
Always revert to him and Taz going through the ring at Convention Hall in Asbury Park. I mean, that's 5 miles away from my house. It was, you know, his homecoming. It was billed as as a homecoming. It was all of his friends, family, everybody that had grew up that knew Scott Bigelow as the amateur athlete. You know, that was the point for me to remember as a fan, being a spectator, you know, sitting and watching my father, you know, as someone who, as a fan. Backstage, I don't have so many memories of like sitting with him, because you take for granted those things when you're a kid. You know, you take for granted the little things that your parents tell you, and you know, like he was big on bipping you in the back of the head. So like I'm sure I was getting popped in the back of the head for some stupid things left and right, but you know, like the things that I took for granted when he was alive, I miss in his passing. I remember just the to do of being in that environment. You know, it comes back and forth, and like as I got older, I got fortunate enough to where he took me on a couple road trips with him, and like we spent nights in the hotel and like had conversations, you know, talks of the birds and the bees and stuff like that, like being like two guys on the road and like, and I was fortunate enough to get that. So those are the things that I remember, which is funny, like the Olympics, right? That's going on right now. We watched like the Atlanta Olympics sitting in a hotel room, and like I might be like 6 years old and him telling me about like the birds and the bees, and I'm just like I don't even know which way's up. Like, so that's what I remember.
Yeah.
You know, the locker room or sitting around, you know, maybe laying around the ring. Like I remember pre-match them going stretching out and like being able to go in the ring with him and sit there and like jump off the ropes and them just talking about the match and how it's gonna go, things like that. But you take all that for granted when you're there. You know, you don't stop and look, you know, and say that it's gonna end, because it is so very short for all of these guys. Not, you know, it's like a professional athlete's career. You're lucky to have 3 solid years, and especially in wrestling, is once you start, you're deteriorating. You're never as good as you're never going to be 100%. So you just got to stop and enjoy it in the moment for a minute, I guess. And I didn't get a chance to do that, but I still have some really, really great memories of that time.
Definitely. And in his later years, he after his career, he opened was it a burger joint or a restaurant? Is there any memories that stick out from that? I found that interesting.
So that actually, I never got a chance to go see that. That was open for only a few months. But what's funny is Joey Janela from AEW
yeah.
messaged me the other day and was like, "Yo, somebody sent me this," and it was the flyer for his Bam Bam Bigelow's Beast Burger. Like somebody still has that flyer from, it was like in like Pennsylvania, and it had like, you know, we specialize in subs, milkshakes, and then it was like, can you feast on the beast or something crazy like that, like, and it was like a 1 pound giant, something just like so amazingly huge and poor clogging. But that it's funny that like I forgot about that, and Joey Janela messaged me, was like, check this out, and I'm like, dude, that's crazy. It's just like flashbacks.
Awesome. And I'll just throw some names at you and see like if there's any memories that stick out, like either interactions you had with them or like observing thing with your dad. I know they didn't necessarily get along, but did you have any interactions with him yourself, Shawn Michaels?
I remember one time we were in Las Vegas before SummerSlam. I met him going into a pool. And like I said before, like those guys, whether there was animosity between each other or not, they were always the most respectful. You know, they kept it professional to the family. So
yeah,
even though you knew, like even as a kid, you were able to pick up and you're like, this is like a bad guy, you know, so to speak.
yeah.
He was nice, you know, he had that rap beat because he's got like a Texas little draw. He's like, hey, big man, you know, how you doing? But like, I remember meeting him and then like him being on like the corner of the pool with like 3 women around him and just like swimming over in the corner with like my father and mother, like just, but that was, you know, that was one of the interactions. He was cool to me. You would never have known otherwise. And yeah, I remember swimming in a pool with him, and that guy had like 3 girls around him. I was like, man,
I want to be that guy.
I want to be you. I want to be that guy. Yeah.
Crush, Brian Adams.
Crush Brian Adams. I remember the character more than I remember off screen. Like I remember the like whole Matt Bourne, you know, like with the Doink and
yeah,
like,
yeah.
And I'm like, I remember that and watching that, and might actually having been there, like as a kid. I remember and he was enough, just like Adam. Like I loved the character. It was just such a cool thing. Every time he came on, it was like he was a huge dude. Loved it, loved it.
Owen Hart.
Owen Hart, not as much of interactions with Owen as it did with Brett. My father loved Owen, loved him, respected him so much. Um, from what I from it's weird how the certain things that you remember about people, but I remember my father saying that Owen Hart was very frugal. He was very smart with his money. Like they worked and they made very good money for being professional wrestlers at the time, and him just kind of saying that Owen was very frugal with his money and penny pinched where they could.
Yeah.
And it's weird. Like, why do I remember that? And because it's something that's arbitrary. Like, if I could remember things that made me money, I'd be good. But no, I remember that Owen Hart was a penny pincher.
Like you mentioned him earlier on in the moment in ECW going through the ring and everything, but any memories behind the scenes stick out of Taz?
Taz, I remember meeting Taz and being like, he's like we were the same height, and just being like, man, like this dude comes out and just like his character and his bravado is so much bigger than like you meet him and you're like I was like 12 years old and we're eye to eye, but he was such a nice guy. Like he'd be like, your father always talks about, he always talks about you guys on the road and talks about your brother, your sister. And Taz was cool. Those guys were so cordial. They all, because it was a big locker room back then. So they came and went, and he was a very, very nice guy to me. He was he's a very smart man too. He's very well spoken. Taz is a good dude.
And we'll finish up on this note. If you were to kind of say, like, if you were to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? If you were to kind of summarize your dad for somebody, either from a legacy standpoint or just kind of overall, what would you say to somebody?
I'd say you'd have to find out for yourself. You'd have to do the research yourself. You like to truly know the man is to see the work, like to see how difficult it is to go out as 6'4", 400 pounds and do the acrobatics and have the athleticism to maintain, a 5-minute match, a 10-minute match, a 15-minute match, because you go on, you watch those matches with Bret Hart where they're epics. They're 20, 30 minutes long. And to be able to just continuously put on a show without breaking character, like you have to see it to believe it. And, whether you liked him, loved him, or hate him, you have to respect the caliber that was put out there, because you knew, there's some, entry card guys that when they came on, you're like, this again, like I'm dealing with it's like and this is, I'm allowed to be biased, but trying not to hold bias. Like when his matches came on, you weren't like, oh, let me go to the bathroom. Like, it was always something interesting. He was always contending a Bret Hart or an Undertaker. He was always, almost in the same way that like Sid Vicious, but Sid Vicious got a much bigger push. But in the same way that Sid Vicious would be that like heel to these main characters, he was always there, and you always knew it was going to be a good quality match. So for me to summarize it is you have to watch it and you have to see it for yourself, and whatever you interpret, that's what you take out of it. That's wrestling. That's the beauty of it. Is you don't have to like it, but it's there and it's going to happen with or without you. That's for sure.
Actually, just one more question, actually, before we go. Like, it's inevitable, like, one day he's obviously going to go into the Hall of Fame. It's inevitable. Who would you like to see if it was somebody, if it was a wrestler that was inducting him, who would you like to see actually induct him?
Bret Hart. I mean, like if you're gonna have,
Oh.
if you're gonna get somebody, but I don't know if Bret wants to go back up there. There's guys taking shots at him left and right. He goes and talks on the podium. They're trying to take him out. I'd say the people that were that there's so many people that could talk about Bret Hart, Paul Heyman, anybody like a Dudley Boys, Bubba Ray Dudley, even DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, you know, Doink the Clown. There's those guys would be, I'd be ecstatic. And it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when is it profitable for the company, or when does it make sense, or when is it a good fit. I thought it was going to be Meadowlands. You know, he's a Jersey guy. The Meadowlands is right up here. That was 2 years ago. And then again, I was like, you know what? I don't want to drive to East Rutherford. Maybe we'll go down to New Orleans and, you know, have a big old circus. Because I tell you what, when it does happen, I'm going to be just belligerently obnoxious. Like, we made it to the Hoff. Let's go. Me and my brother are going out. We're getting like Conor McGregor blue suits. We're going to walk in. We're just going to be absolutely rocking the place. Like, for good reason. He deserves it. And we're going to show up and show out.
100%. And yeah, it's definitely inevitable. It's going to happen. It's really not. It's not a legit Hall of Fame until Bam Bam Bigelow, Lex Luger, and there's a couple of other names that I want to get in there that are escaping me right now. But yeah, like it had Vader, Jesus, like your dad and Vader not in the Hall of Fame. It's I don't know, but it'll happen eventually, and it'll be freaking awesome, man. And so thanks again for coming on. It's been great chatting with you, and yeah, thanks, man. Really enjoyed it.
Love having me on. I love being on. I love talking to you guys, and thank you so much for everything. Anytime you want to talk, I'm always available.
Awesome, brother. Take care.
You too.